I'm so excited to be here with you all today, to be coming to you in your conference. And let me tell you what, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I didn't like my last name. I know Juan is a very common name. You probably have a Juan in your life, right? A student, if you're Latino, an uncle or a parent. But my last name, Cangas, it was, oh man, especially in middle school, it would always get made fun of. Always made fun of, right? And it's funny because now as I've gotten older, it's the thing about me that I didn't like that I actually love now because it's unique. It makes me unique. So if we connect during this session and you see me in one of the breakout sessions and we connect, call me Cangas. All right. So let's get into this. I'm an educator. I am a motivational speaker, but I don't like that title. I don't know if you've ever been given a title or a label that you're like, because the reason I don't like it is because it presupposes that I'm going to give you motivation. And that's not the way it's going to work, because some of you don't need motivation. Some of you do. But I'm here today, and I'm going to do my best to inspire you, to give you some tools that you can use back in your classrooms. But you have to live with yourself day in and day out. So I believe more in inspiration, right? Because inspiration comes from within. And so I want you to think about this question. And I know the chat probably isn't working right now, but I want you to think about this question, okay? Why did you choose education as a career path? Why did you choose education as a career path? If the chat is working, go ahead and put it in the chat. And if not, it is. All right, great. Fantastic. Go ahead and put that in the chat right now. Why did you choose education as a career path? What was the main reason that you did that? Maybe you got inspired by a teacher yourself one day. Maybe it's because you've seen people in your community and teachers were one of those people that really motivated you or mentored you. All right, we're getting some feedback here. My first grade teacher. I wanted to help kids. My father was a teacher. Oh, fantastic. To connect with kids. I love learning. I want others to love learning as much as I do. Ooh, me too. I'm a learner at heart. I wanted to help kids. I wanted to share my love of learning. I love these responses. I love kids. Inspired by awesome teachers I had. I'll never forget I had a fifth grade teacher, and her name was Ms. Hartman. And after my fifth grade year, we were going to go to middle school. And I'll never forget the last day of school. She came to me, and I don't know why I have this memory. You know how you have those random memories of teachers? I had this memory of her coming to me. She said, Juan, you're one of my brightest students. And when you get to college, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there in your college graduation. Now, I was from fifth grade. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. And I was thinking, like, I don't even know what this college thing is. But I admire you so much that I want to get there just for you, right? Like, I remember that was the first time that I even started thinking about what college was going to be like or what I wanted to do with my future. So I think most of us have had teachers that have inspired us, or we've just had this desire to help kids. And for me, out of all my labels or titles that people have given me, I've given myself one, okay? This is how I like to describe myself. I am a supporter and a fan of young people. Right? I believe in young people, as I know you do, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes they frustrate me. Sometimes it's hard to get their attention because they're all over the place. But deep down inside, I believe in them. I believe in young people and their ability to do something not only great for themselves, but for other people as well. I believe in their heart. I believe that if we give them the right tools, they can not only be successful, but they can be productive members of our society who then are not just thinking about themselves, but also think about others. And the reason that I have this hope, especially for underrepresented populations, like I mentioned on there, I was privileged enough to start an after-school program for students from different cultures, and my heart goes out, right? I love all students, but there's a group of students sometimes that you feel really connected with, and that's for me. These students that are refugees or immigrants, and the reason for that is because I think a lot of these students sometimes are unlikely leaders, are people that maybe we don't usually get chosen first to be leaders in our classrooms, in our schools, or sometimes even in our communities. And the reason I have that passion is because you see this guy right here in this picture. This guy right here is the unlikeliest of leaders. Because this guy right here was once this kid right here in the blue jersey. See, I know what you're thinking, okay? How in the world did you come from that to this? Well, let me tell you a little bit about where I was, okay? This kid in the blue jersey right here was this kid. I was in middle school, and there was a point in my life when I was in trouble with almost every adult in my life. I was in trouble with my parents. I was in trouble with my teachers because I wasn't listening and I wouldn't go to school. I was in trouble with the police. In fact, I'm ashamed to share this story, but at my personal lows in life, I remember I was driving a car and I get pulled over by the police, and the police comes up to me and, they start checking in the car and they find some drugs. And they take me to the police station and they call my mom, and the officers are in front of me and they're interrogating me. And part of my problem back then was that I didn't have a filter between the moment that I had a thought and the moment that I acted out. I'm sure that you could have some students like that in your life right now, right? But the moment I thought something, I would just act out on it. And in that moment, as I was getting confronted in the police station, I remember I got a thought, but it wasn't the smartest one. And the thought was, get out of this situation. And so I got up and I started running. Okay. Now you're probably thinking like, what in the world? I wasn't trying to run away from the police, right? I was in a police station, but I was trying to run away from that situation. And it was a perfect example of when I was growing up, I'd always try to run away from situations. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're sitting a student down, you're trying to talk to them, and even if they just don't get away physically, mentally, right, you can just tell that they're not there. That's the kid I was at that moment. And the only way that I could get from that moment, which was one of my personal lows in life, to the person that you see today, who was able to go to college, who was able to find a successful career, who was able to be a productive member of society. The only way I am able to be here with y'all today is because of an unlikely leader that helped me when I was growing up. See, this unlikely leaders, most people wouldn't consider them a leader, because sometimes I think we label leaders as, oh, you got to have this level of education, right, to be a leader, or you have to have this certain status or this certain knowledge base, or, you name it. We put all these labels on leaders. And let me tell you what, this person, most people wouldn't have considered them a leader because they didn't even graduate middle school. They didn't even get out of middle school and didn't get an opportunity. This person didn't even know English. This person didn't have all the educational titles, but let me tell you what, they were the wisest person that I ever knew. For me, my greatest teacher, as for many of us probably, is our parents, right? And for me, it was my mom. See, my mom has taught me so many great lessons. I mean, I'm grateful to all my teachers that taught me the math, the science, right? The writing, the reading. But my mom has taught me so many life lessons that has allowed me to take those tools that I learned in the classroom and actually apply them to life. See, my mom, she taught me one of the most important lessons of leadership. That if you're going to be a great leader, not just a good leader, right? In good circumstances, but if you're going to be a great leader in the classroom, in your community, in this world, then you got to have a vision for the future. You got to be able to see what's not currently there, right? What's hard to see. Because anybody can see what's apparent when you open your eyes and you see the current state of things. In fact, if you look at things around you, I'll be honest, there's a lot of problems. I don't know if you've noticed, if you've opened up your phone, but there's a lot of problems in our communities, right? There's a lot of problems in our country. There's a lot of problems even in our schools. In any school, look, I've had the privilege of going to over 34 different states, I've been in Pennsylvania to California. I was just in California actually on Tuesday. I've been to Texas, Alabama. And one of the great things that's allowed me to see is education from a national standpoint, right? Because even though we're all on the same mission, the way we do it is a little bit different in every state and even in every, school district. But the one thing that I've noticed is that every single school, no matter what, has those people that are focused on the problem, or those people that are looking forward to the vision of what they want to create, and they're focused on the solution. And look, I'm not blaming you. Right now, I don't know your situation. You might be caught up in the problems. You might be thinking, man, I don't know if this profession's good for me right now. I don't know if this is something I want to continue. I know some of you might be in that spot. And I don't know your situation, but I know this. No matter what, if you're going to be successful in whatever area of your life, you got to be able to see what's hard to see, to have a vision, to try to see things the way you want them to be. See, I learned a long time ago, there's 3 steps to leadership, right? See things as they are, but not make them worse than they are. Don't make things worse than they are in your life. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes I do, okay? I'll say personally for myself, I over dramatize things. I think, oh my goodness, this thing's going horribly wrong. And maybe it might be going wrong, but it's not horribly wrong. Sometimes, like the students say, right? We get in our feelings. Adults we get in our feelings as well. So see things as they are, but not make them worse than they are. Because when you make things worse than they are, then it immobilizes you from moving forward. If you make the problem so big, then you give yourself an excuse of why you don't want to make it better. And you know what? Excuses make you feel good for the moment. They help you connect with other people that have the same excuse and same problem in your schools, but they don't help students and they don't help us move forward. And so a great leader not only sees things as they are, right? And doesn't make them worse than they are, but they see things better than they could be. They see things, man, my classroom right now this year, you might be thinking like we started off okay. The kids are a little, are not paying as much attention now. How would you like it to be? How would you like it to change? What rhythms and rituals and norms can you establish again in your classrooms to be able to help you set the tone and move forward in the direction you want your classroom to go, or your school or your district? Because just saying, well, I don't have any control, doesn't help you or doesn't help anybody else. So how would you like it to be? I know it's not going to be exactly how you want it to be. Life isn't that way. But if you could dream it up, right? If you could say, man, if these things were components of my classroom or my school or my district, how would I like that to be? What's the dream? What's the vision that I have? And then number 3, you got to make it that way. You got to put some action into it. Even on those days, I know right now there's days where you're just exhausted, where you're just like, man, I just don't know. I could just do barely what I've always done. But if you do what you've always done, then you're gonna get the same results that you've always gotten. And if you want something new, then you gotta try something new. Look, I'm just teaching you what I learned from my mom, right? Because she was able to do this in very difficult circumstances. See, when my mom was pregnant with me, I'm the oldest, so obviously I'm the favorite child. My siblings aren't here to defend themselves, all right? So I get to tell my story the way I want it. And so I was my mom's oldest child. When she was pregnant with me, she was living in this place called Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, which is right across the border from the United States. It's right across the border from El Paso, Texas. In fact, my mom lived so close to the United States, Mama could literally go outside her doorstep and she could see the United States from her doorstep. That's how close. And all she would have to go, to go to the U.S. is go across this bridge, and then she would be in the United States. Now, when my mom, I'm going to be honest, when she was living in Ciudad Juárez at that time, it was because it's the border city. There's a lot of drug trafficking going on. There's a lot of violence, and especially in the 1980s, there's a lot of violence for women. And so it was not safe for my mom to be out at night. And so my mom was in this dangerous place. We were living in poverty. We didn't have much. And so the current circumstances wasn't what she wanted it to be. But my mom was a great leader, and she seen it. She closed her eyes and she thought about the future that she wanted, not just for herself, but for her son to come. And she thought, you know what? I want my son to be born in the United States. Right? Now, silly question. I know you know the answer. But you know how we do this. We ask these rhetorical questions sometimes in class. I want you to put it in the chat. What do you think would be the reason, if you ask my mom, what is the reason that you want your son to be born in the U.S.? What do you think would be the reason she would tell you? And if you speak Spanish, give me a Spanish word, because my mom doesn't know any English, right? So what would be the word? Yep, it's safer. Again, if you speak Spanish or you know Spanish or you pretend to know Spanish, put some Spanish words in there too. Oportunidades, better quality of life, freedom, more opportunities. Yep, un mejor futuro, esperanza. I love it. I love it. Yep. Safety. Más oportunidades. Mejores oportunidades. Absolutely. So my mom would tell you most definitely opportunities. Okay. That was one of the many things that she wanted me to have, right? An opportunity to, but you all are being really nice. Okay. If my mom was straight up with you and you were having a little cafecito together, she would say, the main reason I want my son to be born in the U.S. is los papeles. Los papeles. You're like, what do you mean? What does that mean? The papers, right? My mom knew that in the United States, if you're born here, you get that Social Security card paper that so many of us that have it take it for granted sometimes, and how many opportunities it gives us. Because she knew that in the U.S. papers added up, right? See, if I get that Social Security card paper, then I can get an opportunity to get that high school diploma paper, and then that college degree paper, and then one day, that green paper. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, my mom has some money, right? And so my mom has this dream. She wanted me to be born in the United States, and then she makes a plan. She starts having her doctor's visits in the United States to get everything arranged for me to be born in the United States. Now, let me ask you a question, okay? Let me ask you a question, and I want you to put it in the chat so I know that you're responding to me, okay? Have you ever had a dream, a really big dream, something you really wanted to happen, and then you even made a plan, right? Like, this is the way things are going to go. It might have been this year. You might have had your lesson plans all made out. You had, like, this year's going to be different than last year. Now, let me ask you a question. Even if you have a dream and even if you have a plan, do things always go the way you plan them? Yes or no? No! Of course, right? Exclamation mark. No, 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 no. In fact, they probably more often than not don't go the way you want them to versus the way you want them to, okay? I don't know why life is that way. So my mom tells me the story of when I was born and how she faced this obstacle to the dream she was trying to accomplish. So true story. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 weeks before I'm supposed to be born. And my mom wakes up and she's starting to have contractions. But I'm not supposed to be born until 2 weeks later. And so she doesn't have anything planned, right? Now what she does, she has a choice. Am I going to, go to the hospital here in Mexico, which is the safest thing to do? Or am I going to go to the border and try to get over the border to go to the United States? Now, a sane person would go to the hospital, right? But this person has a dream. So she puts on her chanclas, her sandals, and she starts walking to the border at 3 o'clock in the morning, one of the most dangerous cities in Mexico. I don't know how she did it. And as she's coming to the border, obviously, the Border Patrol, they stop her, and they start asking her questions, and she gets a little nervous. And then she tells me that in that moment, she's getting a little nervous. They take her into interrogation room to question her more, and these two officers are questioning her back and forth, right? Why you want to go to the United States? What's going on here? And then she tells me that in that moment, with all that pressure, her contractions are starting increasing. And then all of a sudden, her water breaks. And the officers see that. And they realize what she's trying to do, right? Like, oh, you're trying to have this baby in the United States. And they reject my mother. And they call an ambulance. And it literally comes over that bridge that I was showing you right here. And my mom gets deported before I was even born. Now, the reason I shared that is for two reasons. The first time that I heard that story when I was young, I cried. Because I'm not here to debate any laws. Look, I'm privileged to be in this country. I love the United States and the opportunity it's given me. I have nothing bad to say about it. And I'm not here to argue any laws, right? The laws are the laws. But you tell me which healthy parent that loves their child doesn't want a better life for them. Which healthy parent, right, that loves their child doesn't want a better life than they even have for themselves, especially if they're in circumstances where they're suffering or where there's no good outlook. Like, that's all my mom wanted, right? And in that moment where she was trying to do something not just for herself, but for her family, she was rejected. She failed. And let me tell you what, the reason I tell you this story is because sometimes, I don't know if you've ever done this, you judge things too quickly. See, when I was growing up, I looked at this story, and this was a story I never wanted to tell anybody else. I didn't want to share with others because it was a bad story in my life. In fact, it was a reason why I would make up why I wasn't going to be successful. See, sometimes there's things that happen to all of us, and it's something that appears at the moment to be something negative, right? From the onset, it looks like it's something negative, but we judge things too quickly. And I would judge that situation, and a lot of times I would make an excuse and I would say, man, I'm not going to make it because I'm an immigrant, right? I'm not going to make it because my mom doesn't know the educational system. She doesn't know how to navigate it. I'm not going to make it because we're low income and we don't have a lot of money. I'm not going to make it because I live in a single parent household. And let me tell you what, so many times we label each other, we label our students, we label ourselves, right? That because of this reason, we're not going to make it. And we don't realize that sometimes in life, the thing that was supposed to break you actually makes you. Not always, but sometimes. Sometimes we can teach our students that the thing that has happened to them and the reason that they're blaming themselves of why they're not going to be successful could actually be the thing that they can hold on to actually make it. Here's an example. So at one point in my life, I started switching the narrative. I started switching the story in my mind. I said, man, I'm so glad that I'm an immigrant. Right? Because I'm an immigrant, now I can help other immigrants and I can empathize with them. Because I'm an immigrant, then I'll be the first in my family to do something that's going to last for generations to come. Right? Because my mom doesn't know any English, then I can be helpful to her as I learn the skills to how to navigate this educational system. See, a lot of the motivation that I ended up having later on in life of changing was because of this story. And there's moments in college where I wanted to give up and I thought, man, I can't give up because my mom didn't give up on me, right? She went through suffering, through failure, through experiences like this. And because of that, because she went through those experiences, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to make those sacrifices she made worth it. In fact, that's been my greatest motivation. Okay. I want my mom to be able to look at me across the stage on the college, on college and high school and say it was worth it. All the sacrifices I went through were worth it. See, sometimes when we work with our students and they're going through some hardships and some challenges, we want to immediately save them from it. Now, there are certain circumstances where, if they're in danger, we have to, right? We have to save them from it. We have to be able to intervene. But I'm talking about other circumstances that we don't realize that some of those challenges are developing. They're developing a young person. And so don't judge it too quickly because you don't know. You don't know how it's going to be used later on to develop that young person. And so some of my greatest mentors have not tried to save me from the challenges, but have helped me work through it and reflect on the lessons that I can learn from them. And if you can do that with your students, right? Not try to save them from every challenge and every barrier, but to help them see how it's going to help them develop them, what they can learn from it, what they can take from it. I always tell students, especially when you're in pain, when you're going through difficult times, I say, don't just go through the difficult time and not learn something from it. You're already going through a difficult time. You're already going through a challenge. You're already going through pain. Get something from it, right? You're already there. And what makes people different from the people that get out of those challenges and make something of that challenge is those that learn from it, that grab something from it, that say, man, I'm down in the dirt. I'm going to grab some soil. I'm going to grab something that later on I can plant with. And that's what this did for me, right? I started changing the way this story later on in my life is a core story in my life. I'm sure you have core stories in your life that you hold on to, that you remember in those difficult times. And the second reason I tell you the story is because my mom taught me, besides having a vision for your life, and at first you're not going to succeed, right? Many times if you have a big dream or a big goal, you're not always going to get it right away. But my mom taught me that even if you don't get on the first try, you shouldn't give up. You try again and try again and try again and try something different, right? And if that doesn't work, then what should you do? Try something else. And so my mom eventually, when I was 5 years old, she came to me and she said, Juan, mijo, I finally found a way. I found a way to get us to the United States, and we're going to be moving here in a few weeks. And I was like, really, Mom? And I was thinking, oh my goodness, where are we going to move? And I was, I was a little kid. I was 5 years old, so I was thinking, oh, are we going to California? She said, no. I said, oh, okay, are we moving to New York? New York? She said, no, tampoco. And I was like, where are we moving? And she said the most odd name I never even heard of. She said, we're moving to Nebraska. I was like, what in the world? What did you say? Nebraska. How many of y'all know where Nebraska is here? Don't be lying to me, all right? And don't pull it up on my map. How many of you all could tell me where Nebraska is? In fact, I'm gonna do a little quiz right here. Put it in the chat. It's somewhere in the Midwest, in the middle of the United States. Where is it at? Okay, all right. We're getting some people. Maybe got some family members there, or have visited, or somehow. We got the College World Series in Nebraska. Okay, I will tell you that. The College World Series. All right, yeah, you got it right, G. But I will tell you what. I've been to a few schools, and every time, especially like in California or New York, or Texas, I'll tell students like I'm from Nebraska, and there's been kids, okay, who have literally told me, "What country is that?" And I was like, "You failed geography, didn't you? But it's okay, we'll still help you out." So yes, Nebraska's right in the middle of the United States, right in G, right there, right above Kansas. And the reason my mom moved there is because in Nebraska we have a lot of meatpacking plants where they slaughter the cows. It drives a lot of workforce here, and we had some cousins that lived here in Nebraska, and they were working the meatpacking plant, and they were talking to my mom. They said, "Hey, you should come move out here. Okay, you can make an honest day's wage for an honest day's work at this meatpacking plant. It's hard work, but if you can work hard and you don't have to know any English, and here's the thing that caught her attention, and your son can have an opportunity at a better education." And when she heard that, right, so many of our, especially our immigrant populations, right? So many of our parents that have come to this country, they don't come here for themselves. In fact, I've had a chance to speak with a lot of parents, from different countries, from Nepal, from Thailand, from Somalia. And I asked them, like, "Hey, if it wasn't for your kids, would you be in this country?" And a lot of them say no. I mean, it's very, very difficult to be here in this country. I don't know the language, the customs and the culture is different. I just feel like a foreigner every time, everywhere I go, because I'm trying to adjust to the system, and it just feels very uncomfortable. I don't know. I feel incompetent sometimes. I've heard parents tell me, but the reason they come, a lot of them, is for their kids, right? So their kids could have that opportunity of education, that opportunity, a better future, that opportunity to be able to have a fulfilling life. And let me tell you, I wish I could tell you. I wish my story was different, right? I wish I could, if I could rewrite my story. I don't know if there's parts of your life that you wish you could have rewritten. I wish I could have rewritten and said, "You know what? I wish when I came to the U.S. that I grabbed every opportunity that I was given." But you already know the story, right? The opposite is true. You know that I was this kid in the blue jersey that was kept on making mistakes over and over again. And let me tell you, when I was going through this difficult time, a lot of people labeled me. And some of them were my own teachers, some people in the community. And I don't blame them. Right? They'd say, "Man, that kid's a gangster. Man, that kid is not going to do anything with his life. That kid is probably going to end up in jail or dead." And I don't blame them that they labeled me, because they were only stating what they could see with their eyes in that moment. And let me tell you what. It takes no effort to look at someone in the moment and just judge them. It just doesn't. To see what is apparent, anybody can see that. You know what takes some guts? You know what takes some ganas? You know what takes some heart? You know what takes a great teacher? To see a student, even when they're making some mistakes, and be able to see past those mistakes what they could be. See, that's what a great teacher does, right? Is be able to see a student who's struggling or going through some challenges in life, or going through some academic challenges, and be able to push past what is apparent and see what is unlikely to happen. Because it's unlikely sometimes for our students, especially those that are really struggling, that are going to be successful, but they need somebody to believe that they can become that unlikely leader. They need that. We all need that. We've all needed it at times in our lives. Even if your story is not like mine, there's been moments where you've had to differentiate your mistakes from yourself. And that's what my mom did, right? When I was making these mistakes, or even when I told her that I was going to be a teenage father at the age of 14, she could have just clearly given up on me, or said, "There is no way that this kid is going to make it." And the odds were against me. The statistics were against me. I don't know if you know the statistics for teenage parents, but they're not very good at graduating high school, let alone going to college, let alone being in their kid's life. But the reason that I'm here with you all today is because even when I was making those mistakes, my mom did something really special that great teachers do as well. She differentiated my actions, my behavior from my identity. She differentiated my behavior and my actions from my identity. See, she would say things like this. She would say, Juan, you're making mistakes, but you're not a mistake. See, Juan, you make it, you're failing. And she'd be flat out, right? She wouldn't be like delusional about things and say everything's amazing, because it wasn't. But she would differentiate. She would say, you're failing right now at this. You're failing in this course, but you're not a failure, right? You could be something more. Juan, you've done things that are not good, but it doesn't mean that you're not good. See, sometimes we have to differentiate the behavior, which is so hard sometimes, from the student's identity, because it's really hard to change someone that you are. It's easier, not the easiest thing, but it's easier to change a pattern, a habit of people doing certain things. See, some of your students, some of the people in your building, some of you yourself, right? We're creatures of habit. We get into a habit in a loop over and over again. And sometimes that loop is productive and it's helpful, and sometimes it's not. But you are not those things. Maybe there's been a certain way you've been doing things this year and they're not working. Well, good, because you're not those things. Okay? You weren't born a teacher. You learned how to be one, right? You were born an administrator. You learned how to do that. And so you can learn new ways, new patterns. And when I started to believe that, I wasn't my mistakes, that I wasn't defined by those things, but I was defined by the people that believed in me, right? I was defined by the belief that I could change and I could do something different, that I could be malleable. We talk about this all the time in our circles, in our education circles, about having a growth mindset. What does that mean? A growth mindset, because we've all heard it before. That means that you realize that your brain, right, is malleable. You can learn things and you can change things. And we believe that in kids. But at some point, as we get older, we think as adults, like our brain gets hardened and we can't change anymore. And that's not the truth. You're still making connections. We are still learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I hope that one of the, a lot of the people that we're talking about here is that one of the reasons you got into education is because you love learning and you want others to love learning as much as you do. And I do too. But sometimes we get stuck. We get stuck in the ways of doing things, and we just get so stuck that we think that that's who we are and that's the way that things are always going to be. And if you're in a hopeless state right now, that's the reason. Because you're thinking that this is the way it always has to be, but it doesn't always have to be that way. You can change, right? You can change things in your life. And when I started to believe that, I started changing. But I needed people to support me. I needed people that were going to be there for me. And my mom was one of them, but I had some teachers that were champions for me, that started to speak life into me. And I have this belief that if you start speaking life into someone, if you speak life into them long enough, then they start to believe it. You start to believe it. And so many of our students, they've been spoken to and told things that are complete lies about who they are. And some of them from their family, some of them from kids at school. And you could tell they start to believe those things, right? A lot of our kids that are depressed or going through things is because they listen to the lies of others, of the world. But on the opposite end, it works as well. If you speak life into a kid continuously over and over again, finally something will break through, I promise you. And that's what happened to me, right? It was what changed me, is I started to listen to the voices that were helping me out instead of the ones that were trying to hold me down. But that's a change that I had in my life. I'd like to ask you this question, okay? What has been a big change in your life? Or what has been a change you've seen a student make? Sorry. And how did they do it? I'd like you to put it in the chat. What's a big change you've seen a student make, and how were they able to make that change? How were they able to change things around in their life? I'd like you to put it in the chat. What's been a big change you've seen a student make? Maybe academically, personally. Put it in the chat. I love these. I'm loving these. All right. I love these. Keep them coming. So Lucia says, I watched a shy student open up and teach classmates chemistry. Oh, wow. Ed Bovell said, start to believe in themselves, and years later they have the life they wanted. So it's that belief, right? And it just happens. It kind of, it doesn't just happen, but it happens from them being able to step out of their comfort zone and try something new. Showing empathy towards other. Jen Perry says, take responsibility for their academics and behavior and make a positive change. See, sometimes we feel like change has to be this great thing, but sometimes it's just a change in the way that we see things. And it can happen in a moment, right? You can change the perspective. I mean, to change your life, it takes a while, but to change the perspective, you can make that in a moment. I'll give you a perfect example. Do this exercise with me, okay? I can't see you, so I want to pretend that you're doing this exercise with me. I'd like you to, with your right index finger, hold it up in the air like this, okay? Like I am right now. And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to start making a circle clockwise. So clockwise, right? Just kind of in there like this, like I'm doing right now. So you're just going to make your finger, you're going to hold it up in the air, and you're just circling it clockwise. Now, very carefully, very slowly, I'd like you to just bring it down without stopping your hand. I'd like you just to bring it down, bring it down, bring it down, bring it down below your chin, right? So it's below you now, but don't stop it. Now you tell me, what direction is your finger going in now? What direction is it going in now? It's going the opposite way, right? It's going counterclockwise. Now some of you are all tricked out. You're like, hold on, what just happened here? So if you go, try that again. Put your finger up in the air, rotate it clockwise, and then without stopping it, you're just bringing it down. You're bringing it down, and you're seeing it from a different perspective, and nothing else has changed, right? The action is still the same, but you're seeing it in a different way, from a different viewpoint. So that's how change happens. You start to change the way you see yourself, the way our students see themselves, and we're part of that change. We can be part of that change. Now, some students, they change, and we see that change, and that's the great thing about teaching, right? You get to see some of those changes. And some students, you just plant the seed. You're just a seed planter, and you don't know, maybe later on. I mean, I've had some students where I had them in high school and they were going through some difficulties, and it's been such a great joy. And I'm sure you've had this experience happen as well. You see them years later and you're like, wow, they changed. Something changed in them, and you're so glad. And they maybe even say something to you like, hey, that one thing you said to me, it was one of the seeds that was planted to help me later on. See, I always tell adults that I'm working with, when they ask me, hey, Juan, what was the biggest changes that helped you go from this kid that was getting in trouble in school to this kid that was actually getting straight A's in high school and ended up getting a full ride scholarship? Like, what was the difference? And I tell them, it's like there wasn't one main thing, but it was almost like the snowball effect. It's like all the good things and all the advice that my teachers, my parents, mentors would give me, it kept on getting packed on this snowball that was up on this hill. And I couldn't tell you exactly the snowflake that, tipped that snowball over, but eventually there was so much good things that people were trying to get into my life that snowball started rolling down the hill. And then we got some momentum, and then we got moving, and then we started changing, and then the behavior started changing. And so never stop speaking life into students' life. Never stop encouraging students, even when it seems like it's impossible, right? Or like that student is not going to change. You don't know. You might be that last snowflake that they need, or you might be the 100th snowflake, right? But eventually you're adding to that student's ability to change in the future. And I did. Eventually, I started changing things. I went to high school, as mentioned. The biggest change I made was getting away from the friends. I always tell students, like, the greatest lesson that I could ever teach you is who you hang out with is who you become. And so be careful who you surround yourself with, because if you look around to all the people you surround yourself, and even as an adult, right? This lesson has been true of me. Who you hang out with is who you become. So be careful who you surround yourself with. And so I end up going to college, I was one of the first people in my family to graduate college. It was such an amazing experience. And after college, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I had this ideal life that I wanted to have. Okay. You know how you're getting out of college and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I remember I was thinking, man, in college, I wanted to be a speaker. This was kind of my dream job, what I'm doing today. And so I said, but I don't really have experience or the skills to be able to work with young people because I never really had worked with them before. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into teaching and I'm going to get the skills. I'm going to get the knowledge. And then later, about 2, 3 or 4 years of teaching, then I'll go and be this great speaker. And I'll never forget. I don't know if you've ever had I don't know what your first experience of teaching was like, but I remember I got hired in this high school in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was predominantly Latino population of students. So it was about 80% Hispanic. And I remember, great, right? I'm Latino. I know the language. I know the culture. I know the food, everything, right? So I'm going to be able to connect with my students really easily. And I'll never forget the first day of class. I walk into my classroom, and out of 25 students, 20 of them are these students from an Asian culture that I've never heard of. There's 3 African students that are refugees to this country, and then there's 2 Latino students. And we looked at each other like, what in the world? Like, I was not expecting that at all. Now, what I found out later was that in Omaha, you wouldn't think this in Nebraska, but we're a big refugee hub, So we have a lot of the infrastructure, like the nonprofits, the city, the housing areas. We have a big infrastructure to be able to accept refugees, and so we get a lot. And at that time, we had a big influx of refugees from Thailand, Korean students, from Nepal, from Somalia, and so these students were in the school and that I was teaching, and I was not expecting that. And let me tell you what, I was shocked because I didn't know how I was going to connect with them, right? I mean, I could connect with my Latino students because I was Latino and I got them, but these other students, I didn't know anything about their culture. But I don't know if this happened to you, but this happened to me. When I started working with students, I fell in love, right? I don't want to be corny, okay? But I did. I fell in love with the students. I fell in love with the process of teaching. I fell in love with just helping students. And in that process, I wanted to serve them. And one of the things that we noticed about these students, especially these immigrant refugee students, is that they were coming to school and they felt completely out of place, right? Because they didn't know the language, they didn't know the culture. And so they would come to school and then they would leave immediately. None of them were being involved in after school activities or being engaged in sports besides soccer. And we noticed that it was hurting them, right? We know this. We know that students that are involved in after school activities or are not engaged in their school are not engaged in their classroom. And so these students they were suffering. They were suffering academically and also their ability to learn English. And so we said, I got to do something. And it was just out of a need to want to serve and help out the students. And so we decided, you know what? What can we do? Well, I started thinking, you know what? Maybe we could start an after school program for these students, for these unlikely leaders. And so we did that. We started an after-school program that we called the Thrive Leadership Club. And that's what, in my bio, when they were talking about it, that's what I founded. And in the club, it was just a space for students to come and feel like they belonged. It was a place for students to be able to connect with each other, to practice their English, right? To get some tutoring, but more than anything else, to just feel heard and seen. And it started, the reason we named the club Thrive is because so many of our students were in survival mode, and we wanted to flip the script, right? We wanted to switch it up. I met amazing students like Ismael and Pablo too. Ismael was one of my first students. He's from Guatemala, and you ever meet some students and you're like, wow, like you think you're inspiring, they're helping them out, and they inspire you and help you out and help you see the world in different places or different ways. This is these 2 students for me. Ismael, he's originally from Guatemala, and him and his brother came to live in Nebraska, but their mom couldn't come over. She wasn't able to come to the United States. So his dad would go back and forth from Guatemala to the United States, and sometimes would leave them here like months on end alone, right? To be able to pay the bills, go to school. And this kid, man, he was an unlikely leader, right? He had all these things that were against him because of all these challenges he was facing. But man, he had the greatest attitude. Like, he'd come to school sometimes with maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep because he had to work the night before, but he would do the darnest to just stay awake to do this homework, and he ended up graduating, right? Pabwe too. She was a student that, one of my first students that I had. She's Karen, originally from Burma. She was a refugee that came over to the United States because of all the civil unrest that's going on in Burma back in the 1950s when her parents fled. And Pabwe too was trying to just navigate the school system, right? She was trying to figure things out herself too, and it's especially different because her language is completely different. Like, even the way that they write the alphabet is completely different than anything we see in English. And so helping these students navigate was one of the biggest privileges of my life. And let me tell you what, I was born for this. Like, I was built for that moment in time. I remember thinking like, wow, like, I don't know if you've had this experience in teaching, but so many times at the start of when I started teaching, I felt like, man, I don't have all the tools. I don't have all the knowledge base to be the best teacher because I'm still learning. But let me tell you what, I realized that you're built for some of these moments. See, some of you were built and you've had these experiences. You were equipped earlier on with different experiences you've had to have the heart to teach. And with the heart to teach, the more you inflame that heart, then you can get the skills. See, some of you have been feeling so, what's the word? You've been feeling maybe down about your teaching experience. Not everybody, but some of you, right? There's so many challenges and so many changes, especially after the pandemic, that you've kind of started to dim your heart a little bit about teaching. But I want you to remember the start. Remember those initial students that you first had. Remember the joy that you got from it. Because sometimes we just forget. We get caught up in the problems and we forget that. And remember this. Remember that you were built for this moment. You're equipped. You've had experiences that serve you to this day, right? You've had experiences that have allowed you to be able to serve students in a unique way. Besides the skills that you learn, the heart is so important when you're teaching. Because look, remember when I told you about the story with the bridge? My mom coming over? I never realized, I looked at that moment and I judged it too quickly, because now when I was working with these students, I realized, man, I don't know if I'd have the passion to serve students, especially that are immigrants to this country, if I wasn't an immigrant myself. Because I know what it's like. I know how difficult it is, right? To navigate the system, for your parents to feel incompetent of, navigating the educational system, to not know the path and always having to ask questions, to not knowing the language and feeling bad about that, right? But if I hadn't had that experience, then I don't know if I would have had the ability to be able to connect with my students as much. And I know what it feels like to be that student that is doubted. I know it, right? I know teachers and them seeing you and saying, I don't know if that kid's going to make it. I know what that feels like. And because of that, it equipped me to serve these types of students. But it was almost like I got my college education before I went to college. And so that's why we can't judge too quickly, especially when we're working with students that are different than us, that have different values and beliefs, and not just culturally different, right? But maybe they generationally different. They think differently than us. And so many of that is we judge too quickly. I'll give you an example of this. One thing that really, really helped me in serving young people is I started to hold back my biases and look at things differently and ask more questions and become more curious. Because sometimes you might see a student behaving in a certain way, especially if they're from a different culture. But you got to realize when we see things, we see them through our own cultural lenses. So we have our own cultural lenses that we see the world through. We don't just see the world the way it is. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm going to show you a video right now. And in this video, I want you to imagine that I'm showing you a little scene of a culture that you've never interacted with before. Okay, this is a hypothetical culture. It's not a real culture, but I'd like you just to see the behavior as if you were observing this new culture, and as you're watching this behavior from this cultural group, I'd like you just to make some analysis. Just think about, hey, what are some of the values of this culture? What are some of the beliefs based on my limited amount of information? I know I'm not giving you all the information, okay? But just based on the limited amount of information you got from the scene I'm going to show you, what do you think the values and the beliefs are of this culture? So here you go. Let me show you here. So there's no sound, but just watch the video. All right, end scene. Okay, I know you have a limited amount of information, but I'm asking you, just based on your analysis, what you observed, what would you say? What would you hypothesize? Right? We're scientists in this here. We're trying to hypothesize. What would you hypothesize are some of this culture's beliefs, their values? Put it in the chat. I'd like to know. You know, who do they see? Is there a hierarchy in this culture? Just what do you think are their values and their beliefs? Keep them coming. So we have respect for elders. There's submissive women, inequity between genders. Okay. Some people are saying the male is more important in this culture. The men are more important than women. Now I know you have limited amount of information, and I'm gonna give you some more right now. But keep these coming. So not every person is treated equal in this culture. Some are put on a pedestal, and some people are treated inferior. Okay, men are valued higher than women. So the children are tending to their adults. So maybe the male was the adult and the female was one of their children. Okay, women are subservient. The culture is male dominated. Okay, now I'm going to give you some more information because obviously you can't know everything from just seeing, you know, a short little scene in a culture's life, right? So as I'm telling you this information about this culture, I'd like you to notice if anything changes in the way you see things. All right, let me tell you about this culture. So this culture worships the earth. Ecology is their god. Second in line to this god is their reverence of women. Women are the leaders and are in complete control. Men's sole purpose in life is to protect the women. Because of women's subservient position in society, they must never directly touch the earth. If they step on the earth to move from one place to the another, they must raise their feet off the ground when they arrive at their direct destination. Women are the only ones allowed to sit directly on the ground they're God. This culture is also violent. Consequently, men must always walk in front of the women so that they can protect them from harm if they are attacked. Men must always drink and eat everything before a woman does. If the food or drink has been poisoned, they must sacrifice themselves to save the life of the woman, the true leader. Interesting. Now, if you don't overanalyze it, how many of you all would say getting more information changed my perspective? Put it in the chat if it changed some of your perspective. And not everybody, okay? All right. Yes, of course. And I know some of you knew I was setting you up, right? But the reason is because we do this. We just do, right? Our brains, when I went to college, I started psychology, right? And our brains just work in this way. And if we're interacting with people that are different than us, different generation, different culture, we have to constantly fight against our biases. And we have them. And this doesn't mean you're a bad person. And it doesn't mean that you're evil. But we all have biases. We all have ways that we look at the world because of the way that we're raised in our culture. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's wrong when you try to make it the right way for everybody else. And everyone else should see it that way. Because there's so many different people's point of view. And so this is one thing that's helped me out is as interacted with different cultures, right? This is just a little advice from me. This is a mindset shift. Whenever I observe something from a student that I don't really understand, I tell myself this very phrase, and it's a mindset shift, right? If you're stuck in a scene, then get curious about the story. Sometimes we see our students in a certain light because we only see them in that scene of their life versus trying to understand the whole story. See, we've all had this happen before, right? Where our student, maybe they're acting out or they're not paying attention in class or they're sleeping and we're thinking they're being disrespectful. We can thinking they don't really care or, they don't care about this class. But then maybe we talk to them and we find out a little bit more about the story, like what's going on at home. And we realize maybe the student is working late at night because they're trying to pay the bills at home, or something happened. Their parents got divorced and they're dealing with a lot of anxiety. And most of the time it has nothing to do with us. We take it offensively, but it has nothing to do with us most of the time. And it's something going on with their story. And when you get invested in students' stories versus just judging them for the scene, then you make that ultimate connection that we need as educators in order to help students to change. And here's an actual strategy, right? Just replace I know with I wonder. I wonder. I wonder what's going on with that student today. I wonder what's going on, with our leaders in our school building. I wonder what they're thinking about doing and changing in here. I wonder, sometimes even just, I wonder what's their best intention. See, sometimes we give people the worst of intentions, right? We say, oh, they don't care. They don't want to do this. They don't want to help us out. But just even, I wonder what they're intending to do. What was the intention behind it? Even though maybe things didn't work out the way we wanted them to. So that's what we started doing, right? That's one of the ways that we made this club successful for students is we started to have a space where students didn't feel judged. They feel accepted, they feel seen, they feel heard. And when you create that kind of environment for students, then the learning comes. Then students want to learn, right? Because they feel like they're seen and they're known. And let me tell you, as I'm finishing up here, I know one of the greatest gifts as an educator is to be able to identify and see some of these unlikely leaders. That's been the mission of my life, to seek out these unlikely leaders, the people that are not chosen in our schools to be able to step up, right? Or not chosen to be in these leadership organizations. Because look, for me, when we as leaders, right, leaders in our communities, leaders in our classrooms, when we make leadership more inclusive for all, your most unlikely leaders can become your most powerful heroes. Powerful heroes like these two that I talked to you about earlier. Ismael ended up graduating high school, went to college, got his master's in accounting, and he's now coming back and helping us with our after school club. Heroes like Pabwe too, who ended up graduating high school, going to college. He started an organization on college, a student organization that helped Quran students just like her to be able to feel connected, be seen on the college campus, and it's helped students for over 13 years now. And now she works in the nonprofit realm. She works for a nonprofit that helps resettle other refugees in the community. So let's go out and seek these unlikely leaders. Now, when I was showing you this picture earlier, I tricked you a little bit, okay? Because when I was talking about the unlikely leaders, you thought I was talking about myself there in the middle. But I was actually talking about this gentleman right here on the left. See, sometimes you got to be able to stretch your vision and see more than what's just obvious, right? See this gentleman right here. I know as teachers, right, we're almost like parents. Like we shouldn't have favorites, but we do. We do have favorites. And this guy right here, his name is Timon Garoon. And he's been one of my favorite students I've ever had. I met him in 2014 as a freshman in high school. And when he was a junior, he came up to me and says, "Hey, I think I want to do what you do. I think I want to be a facilitator, a speaker." And for the last 9 years, he's been hanging around with me, and I've had the privilege to mentor him. And now he's doing what he loves to do, right? He's speaking, he's facilitating, he's going around the country and working with students all over. And let me tell you what, I think that's the greatest joy. Because especially when I was younger, I thought, you know what? The greatest joy is going to come when I fulfill my dreams and I get to the things that I want. But as educators, and you have the heart of an educator, when your greatest joy is not just when you succeed, but when your students and the people you work with succeed. So, join me on this mission. Let's go and find these unlikely leaders in our schools, in our communities, because they're going to be our most powerful heroes. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.